International Literature Festival Berlin, our anniversary, a quarter century of world literature. The desire to expand the horizon of world literature in our minds has always been part of the festival's DNA. 2 years ago, we introduced something new. Each year, we invite an international curator in residence to shape the program with us. This year, it is Cristina Rivera Garza. From our collaboration, 9 events have emerged that open up a window in the Spanish-speaking world. Tonight, however, we meet her as an author. It is the German premiere of Lilianas Unvergänglicher Sommer. It's the first book translated into German, and I want to say a warm welcome to the translator, Johanna Schwering, who is with us. And a note for our Spanish-speaking audience, the event is in English with simultaneous interpretation into Spanish. I hope you have all your headphones. Many thanks to Mahael Medkuri and Maria Barnuevo for the interpreting. The moderator this evening is Simone Schröder. She studied comparative literature, Hispanic studies, and political science in Mainz, then lived in London, earning her PhD with a thesis on nature essays. Simone is also a translator, editor of several anthologies, and essayist. And since 2019, she is a dear colleague and head of our program. Like the entire festival, this evening is made possible only through the support of our partners. Our heartfelt thanks goes to the Hauptstadt Kulturfonds as our main partner, main funder. I thank the Berliner Sparkasse for hosting tonight's festival kitchen, where we all can engage after this event. And before we begin, just one small request. The festival is about being present and experiencing literature live. You don't need your phone, just turn it off. Please no photos, recordings, and videos during the event. You're welcome to do it in the end or afterwards at the signing. And now, I wish you all a wonderful evening and a memorable book premiere.
Muy buenas tardes. And thank you so much to Lavinia for the generous introduction. Cristina, it is an honor to be here with you tonight. You've been to Berlin before. You've been a fellow at the DAAD and a fellow of the American Academy in Berlin. We've met there 2 years ago. This was the first time we spoke, and we have been in conversation about your program over the past couple of weeks, and what better way to resume this conversation than here at our festival on the stage. I could spend all evening just talking about your impressive achievements, but I want to be mindful of everybody's time, so I will outline just 3 things that I believe will be relevant to our conversation tonight. First thing is cotton. Some of your ancestors worked in cotton fields in Mexico. Your book The autobiography of cotton traces how cotton shaped landscapes, labor, migration, and everyday life across the US-Mexico borderlands. We need cotton to produce textiles. The fabrics of your writing are hybrid. You interweave two cultures, Mexico and the US, different genres, research and imagination, art and activism. Second, you are a professor and director of the only PhD program in creative writing in Spanish of the US, which is based at the University of Houston. And third, you're not only teaching, but also writing in two languages, Spanish and English. It is rare for any author to excel in two languages. You are going beyond writers like Vladimir Nabokov and Joseph Conrad in that you have not substituted one language for another, but you're active in both of them, and that is a side effect that allows you to win awards in either of them, which you have done. The book we're here to talk about tonight, the book whose first ever outing in Germany we're about to celebrate, has such a double life. It first came out in Spanish, and then you wrote it again in English. This would be strenuous enough for any book, but the subject matter is one that makes it even more of a challenge. It is a very personal book. It's the story about the life and murder of your sister Liliana in 1990. Your sister was 20 years old. She was a student of architecture in Mexico City. She had been in a relationship with a man from her hometown. The relationship ended, and Liliana was subsequently murdered by her ex-partner. The book has been out in the world for some time. You just told me that you have done around 80 events with the book, which is an amazing number. And this is the first one in German, or about the German version, which is fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey of the book?
Yes, of course. Buenas tardes, buenas noches a todos, a todas. Qué gusto estar aquí, qué gusto verles. Siempre hago la pregunta, ¿cómo están? Yes. Y me encanta escuchar esa respuesta. Thank you so much for your energy and your excitement. I'm also very excited to be here. And thank you, Simon, for, we've talked a lot, we've worked together, so I think it was just natural to have this conversation here at the stage. It's been a long journey. For many years, I thought I was never going to be able to write this book. I've written at least a couple of versions before this one, 30 years after the femicide of my sister. But I had tried, and I tried hard before. I have to tell you, I have those, I've kept some of those drafts somewhere in my computer, and I'm very happy. I decided, I had the good sense of not publishing those, because it took me to actually open up the boxes where we had stored Liliana's belongings. It took me, that connection, that material connection with her, to realize that this time, and I'm talking about 2019 to 20, then I realized that what I had been looking for was there. Her voice, her perspective, her thoughts, her interpretation of her life and her surroundings. And it's been, it's taking a lot of time, a lot of patience, courage too, to go through those documents and try to structure a context in which her voice would shine as a rightful protagonist of this book.
We'll talk about the writing process later. Perhaps we could now just listen to Liliana's voice, and you read the first passage from one of the texts. Okay.
Let me see. Here we are. I usually do this when I first talk about the book. I like for everyone to keep in mind Liliana's own voice and rhythm and sense of humor and the quality of her being alive. This, of course, is a book about the femicide, which occurred on July 16, 1990. But more than that, this is a book about Liliana's life. And I've made an effort to write with her, to follow her lead, and to honor her words. So I'm going to start this reading with Liliana's own words, with a letter she wrote. The title of this section in the book, in the English version of the book, is What If You Knew What Would Become of Me? It's in page 81, in case you have the book. All right, here I go. This is the last page of my notebook. Well, the first one from back to front. Do you know what I mean? Depending on how you look at it, because it is a matter of thinking young. It is a matter of thinking positively, a matter of focus. Don't you like that ad? Oh, well, I do. So what? Well, nothing. I am in such a completely lazy mood, and I'm very sleepy too. And when you suffer from those two conditions, but nevertheless, you also have an aversion to sleep during wake hours, there is this very big shock. And do you know what happens? Well, in addition to sleepiness and laziness, a very funny foolishness crops up. That is happening to me right now. So much so that you even feel like sitting down or laying down or kneeling just about anywhere. And then it just so happens that you inevitably start thinking, and you turn to look at the clock on the wall, and you think that your mother is going to arrive soon, and that you have to pay your school tuition bill, and that today you didn't see Angel, and you don't feel like training. You also think that you no longer want to train because when you are not in a quiet environment, it is impossible for you to develop your concentration and full physical potential. And you think that your exams are almost here, and above all you worry. But your worry is not big enough for you to get up, grab your notebook, and study, right? Well, something similar happens when you are like this, because it's something exactly like that, huh? And if you don't know how to express what you are thinking, then something happens that seems very strange to you. It is something like wondering if you really are the one who is writing, as if. And suddenly, as if by magic, you remember a dream. I don't know when I had it. And as soon as it arrives, it just goes away, and you forget it. And you're even more sleepy now, and more. And ouch! Your back itches. You scratch with fury because it bothers you that you can't scratch comfortably. Geez! And you wonder why they put so much chlorine in the pool. It makes my skin so very dry. And dryness is not the worst. But what dry skin gives off, itching. So you keep on thinking about the swimming pool and the chlorine, which in addition to the itching, leaves that characteristic smell of the so-called substance whose chemical symbol is Cl. And then you remember your chemistry class and something else as a result, but it is nauseating, and you prefer to leave it in peace. Peace. Damn. What if there was peace? What if there were no people starving in the world? What if there was justice? What if people really appreciated other people for who they are and not for what they look like or their image? What if I fell asleep? What if you knew what will become of me? Thank you.
Christina, thank you for this reading. You found this diary of Liliana, from which we've just heard an excerpt, together with several other boxes of letters and notes in her student apartment, and took it home to your parents' house, where these boxes were stored for approximately 30 years, a bit like Andy Warhol's time capsules.
Yes.
Although this, of course, is not an art project, something personal. And what did you find in these boxes, and what was the expectation when you opened them, and the feeling?
Yeah, good question. Back then, in 2019, I was thinking mostly about opening up Liliana's case. It had become a so-called cold case, and it was enough for me, enough for my family. I think we were finally ready to openly face the fact that we needed closure. And for me to be able to do so, I needed information. And I didn't know where to go, where to turn to. So taking advantage of some free days I had in early January of 2020, I decided to go back home and finally open up those boxes. I knew where the boxes were. I knew what the boxes contained, more or less. And I was after some address book. I was after some information. I had a very humble aim in mind. But then, when I opened up those cardboard boxes, I realized that some of these notes had been folded into origami shapes. And so when I opened the box, they unfolded at the same time. And it looked like to me that they were leaping at me, that somehow they were trying to reach me. I was obviously very surprised. I started to the reading of all this material, and I did find the address book, so I had the names of Liliana's old friends, people that I wanted to get in touch so that we could gather new information, all the old information. I needed to get to the file, to the homicide case. But I came across something way more. It was way more than I even imagined I was going to be able to see. Yes.
So you hadn't been aware that Liliana was such an avid writer, that she had. I mean, I was quite stunned to learn that she wrote some of the letters several times, drafting them again and again, playing with words. And you also say Liliana was the true writer of the family.
Yes. That was one of the early surprises of the whole process, just to see how devoted Liliana was about writing, how careful. She was, of course, expressing herself, as I've said in the book. She was a young woman trying to find her place in the world, trying to explain the word to herself through writing. But I very soon realized that she was not only expressing herself, she was actually playing and subverting language at the same time. And yes, indeed, some of these letters, she had copied them a couple of times. She kept always a copy for herself. We're talking about the late 20th century, so come on. You had to go through a lot of work to make a copy of one of these things, either by hand or typing the letter. And just thinking about the amount of time that she devoted to this task, I had to think, she was thinking of herself not only as someone who was writing a letter or dropping a note, but as someone who saw herself as a writer. Later on, I learned, by the way, after I've published the book and people started to realize that Liliana was here with us, I came to learn that she had published a couple of essays in local newspapers and local magazines in our native city in Toluca. And so I was very happy to learn that, because among other things, it meant that I was right, that my instinct was right, that Liliana was not only writing to express herself, but that she was actively looking for places to publish. So that's really important. Just going back briefly to the moment of the opening up of the boxes, and just, to me, it was, at that point I was thinking, well, I've been struggling, trying to find a voice to write this book for so many years, and the voice has been here in these papers for all this time. I just needed the courage, and I needed, mostly that, to be able to take a look at the documents. And something really important happened at that point, that I felt Liliana's presence so strongly at that point.
Perhaps we could show some pictures of her writing, and I think we have a letter of her here, and then we also have a second picture. This is her handwriting.
It's a poem by Mexican poet José Emilio Pacheco.
And this is a page from the book where you can see that it's also featured in the in the printed version, and maybe you could comment on what we're seeing here.
So this is another example that I've used to convey this idea that Liliana was thinking of herself as a writer. As you can see in this letter, which she typed, she just deleted every single space in between letters and words and sentences. So she just created one long line, which is actually very difficult to read. And it creates that kind of, you have to gasp for air once you get into the sentence, onto this, it's not even a sentence, into this huge line. And it conveys that sensation of suffocation, I think, that is not necessarily addressed in the letter as a topic, but it is right there in the form. And so that, to me, reading pieces such as these, I was struck by it. I thought, wow, she was not only, placing letters or words on paper. She was actually playing with them in such a way, playing with form in such a way, the form as such became too part of the message. And that's what I think writers do or should, in any case, or in my case. The point of that encounter, that material encounter with all these documents, was absolutely relevant for the form of my own book. So I felt surrounded by Liliana's own presence. I became very aware of the fact that I've been placing my hands on papers that had remained untouched for about 30 years. So in many ways, if we consider that we leave traces wherever we go, we leave traces of our hands, of our skin too, wherever we go, I was just struck by the sensation that I was in fact touching Liliana. And I didn't know this at that precise time, but in retrospective, I think it was at that point that the form of the book was somehow decided. I wanted readers of this book to be able to share that experience, to feel the Liliana's presence very close by. And not as some form of wishful thinking, not just as a metaphor, but as a very physical, carnal sensation. And so thinking about my need to share that specific experience shaped completely the way in which the book is written, and more specifically, how this is structured.
And I think this is working really well. The book starts with you going in search for the court files, which you don't find, but then instead of the files, you find the boxes, you include some of the notes from Liliana, and then the text kind of moves a bit away from your own voice, your own first person.
Yes.
And there are several other first persons entering the text, and one of them is Liliana, But in addition to her, there are also testaments by her friends. You talk to several of them and included interviews. Your parents get a word. You include some articles from the press. And was that when did you decide this to open up the text to all these different voices?
Yeah, I've been working for a long time with an idea of literature that that brings in the voices, the other written pieces that my own work is comprising. It's something that I've been calling disappropriation, and we can talk about that in another context. It's long. It's a long it's a long argument. But I've been very aware of the fact that we are not isolated beings, that we are shaped by others. And in Liliana's case was exactly that. I wanted to get a view of how Liliana was seen, how she was loved, how she was talked to, how she was at that point remembered as well. And so I took into consideration, obviously, the papers that I came across. I wanted Liliana, as I said earlier, to be the rightful protagonist of this book. She had been a victim of this horrific violence. She had been forcibly silenced, and I didn't want to do the same. I wanted to create a book, a structure in which Liliana became the rightful protagonist, which meant that my own grief and my own pain were not going to be the protagonist of this book. I wanted to follow her lead, as I said earlier. I wanted Liliana to be all over the place. I wanted her to shine. And that's one of the reasons why I say that I didn't write this book about her. This is not a book about Liliana. It's a book that I wrote with Liliana. It's a book written, it's a form of co-authorship, and it's a book written in sisterhood. So that's really important. And it's specifically important in terms of how we deal with violence when writing a long piece of nonfiction or of fiction, for that matter. And then, well, I had to carve a very discrete place for myself in the book. I'm all over the book, obviously. I made all the decisions of this book. I have to take responsibility for that. But I didn't want, I just wanted to be in a corner. I didn't want to leave Liliana alone in the stage of the book. Since I was invoking her, I wanted to be there to embrace her through the journey, but in a very discreet way. That's how I dealt with when I was thinking about that. And then I called her friends, and it took a lot of effort and a lot of time too, because remember, we're talking about people who were born, I don't know, in the 1970s, late 20th century. People who are not by any means native digitals. So some of them had Facebook accounts, some of them had Twitter, but not all of them. And so just trying to trace them became a whole enterprise. Fortunately, my husband, who is very savvy in those matters, he was able to locate most of them. And I talked to them. I wanted them to know that that whatever they shared with me, I was going to be very carefully honoring their memory of Liliana. They talked to me knowing that they would have veto power over whatever I wrote, and then well, we can talk about that a bit later, but I wrote and rewrote and revised and sent these drafts to Liliana's friends, to Liliana's own community. They came back with more revisions, and then I would rewrite again. It's long and convoluted, but quite necessary. So what this process gifted me with was with many Lilianas. I knew Liliana, of course, very closely as my younger sister, my only sister, but I was not her classmate at the university. I was not a boy in love with her at that point in time. I was not her best friend. And fortunately, all of them were very willing, very generous with their own memory, with their recollections. And I received these many Lilianas as a gift. I learned that she was writing way more than I was writing back then. I was a student, a university student enrolled in sociology, and according to the university, I studied in the UNAM, the major public university in Mexico City. Our task as sociology students was to change the world. What about that? So I was very concerned about that matter, and Liliana was right. While Liliana was writing and rewriting and revising, and that's one of the reasons why I say that at that point in time, Liliana was actually the true writer of the family. I learned about her fabulous sense of humor, her quick-mindedness, her interest not only on architecture and visual arts and literature, but in film. Just your typical 20-year-old, I suppose, being young, feeling that you're immortal, and this willingness to take on the world, to devour that world that is exciting in many ways to you. So that was one of the many Lilianas that I got in contact with, that I came to know much better after going through the interviews and the research and, of course, the writing of the book.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So Liliana was writing a lot, but she wasn't necessarily aware that her writing would be published, or at least the writing that we've listened to. I would like to ask you about the ethics of writing, because I know that you've been thinking about that. And because it's different than when you write a novel, if it's a real person's texts and not meant to be published, but how did you reflect that? What did you think about that?
It was complicated, of course. I always went back to that first scene that I described earlier, to the origami papers unfolding and leaping at me. I always took that as a sign that they wanted to be read. And then every time that I start a new project, I usually invest a lot of time in research, and the reason why I do this is because I believe that the only authorization, the only permission that we need in order to write something comes from the work of care that is research. So I try to read as much as I can, not only from official documents, but also from what now I'm calling the affective archives.
You also used the word archive of love,
yes,
which I liked very much.
Yes, the archive of love, and with that work, with the work which is research and care at the same time, I think comes a responsibility of reading carefully and on Liliana's own terms. So I tried my best. And that's another reason why I conducted interviews with their friends and other family members, and I tried to compare and contrast whatever I was thinking with what actually was published in the newspapers of the time. So I tried to get as many perspectives as it was humanly possible. And then after that, I did have to go through some rituals, asking Liliana permission to continue with this task. Just remembering some aspects of our childhood, things that we used to do together. Swimming, of course, was one of those. And just going through these very personal, very intimate kind of rituals allowed me to continue with the task.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it was absolutely necessary. I wouldn't have done it if I somehow didn't see enough signs for that. Yeah.
We've heard quite a bit about Liliana and her writing now. Let's talk a bit about the context in which the femicide occurred, and in order to do that, perhaps you could
Yes,
jump
sure.
into the second reading.
Absolutely. It is this, right? Yeah, this is the second one. I'm going to be mentioning here in this fragment the work by the collective Las Tesis. Are you aware of who they are? Yes? No? Yes. Sí, muy bien. Okay. And if you're not, don't worry. We have some excerpts for that. Femicide was not officially recognized in Mexico until June 14th, 2012. When the Federal Penal Code incorporated it as a crime, quote unquote, Article 325, the crime of femicide is committed by someone who deprives a woman of her life because of her gender. Before that date, femicides were called crimes of passion. Yeah. The victims were loose women, wayward girls, women without fear of God. They were called, why does she have to dress like this? They were called, women have to respect themselves first. She must have done something to end up in this mess. It was her parents' fault. She made a poor decision. They were called, she deserved it. The lack of language is overwhelming. The lack of language handcuffs us, suffocates us, strangles us, shoots us, skins us, cuts us off, condemns us. When the feminist group Las Tesis performed A Rapist in Your Path on the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women in 2019 in the center of Santiago, Chile, the piece resonated with so many around the world. And it was not my fault, they said, or where I was, or how I dressed. Such pure, devastating words. It was a language already in use, a language that various groups of activists and various groups of survivors had put to work in courts and in squares, in bustling marches and around dining room tables. But it had rarely reverberated like it did this winter of 2019. So forceful, sharp as a knife, overwhelmingly true. Patriarchy is a judge who judges us for being born, and our punishment is the violence you now see. Do you know that the first time I called the district attorney's office to request an audience, they asked me what I was looking for? Soraya is a friend of mine who joined me in this quest, smokes with unwavering dedication. There is certain sensuality to the way she holds a cigarette between her fingers, and then in the way she brings it closer to her face and places it with such delicacy between her lips. Taken aback, suddenly frozen, I did not know how to answer, I stammered. I hesitated. I'm looking for her file, I said. The smoke in the air, the scent of something very old between our bodies. Just that? The voice on the other side of the phone insisted, puzzled. It is femicide, impunity for my killer. It is the disappearance. It is rape. Right then and there, I realized in the course of that phone call how little I was asking for, how little that was, a file. No, I said, speaking hurriedly, now as I was afraid he'd hang up on me. No, I'm looking for something else. The rapist is you. The figures formed by tobacco smoke rise and little by little dissolve into the air. I want to find the murderer. I want him to pay for his crime. I fell silent again. I swallowed hard. I seek justice, I finally said. And I repeated it again, echoing so many other voices. I repeated it once more firmly this time, with absolute clarity. The oppressing state is a male rapist. I seek justice. And it wasn't her fault, or where she was, or how she dressed. I seek justice for my sister. The rapist is you. Sometimes it takes 29 years to say it out loud. To say it out loud in a phone call with a lawyer at the General Attorney's office. I seek justice. Sometimes it takes an eternity to return to Azcapotzalco and sit under the sheltering foliage of a tree as you listen, trembling with fear, full of disbelief to the improbable song of some birds. Thanks.
10 femicides occur in Mexico each day, meaning that women are being killed because they are women. You've just mentioned the Las Tesis performance, and perhaps we could listen to the sound bit. I guess that most of you will have watched the video, so just to bring back memories, we will briefly listen to it, if it's working. Liliana's name appeared on buildings and in some of these demonstrations as well. Perhaps we can see some images from her name being written in the streets. Your book has had quite an impressive impact on the feminist movement in Mexico. Perhaps you can talk a bit about how people have responded to the book.
Well, the book is in fact linked to that feminist movement as well. It's a result of, in many ways. If I had been able to write the book I wanted to write in the late 20th century, the book about Liliana's story, it would have been very difficult for me because we lacked language. If I had told this story according to the patriarchal narratives, I would have to abide by that. And doing it meant to blame Liliana for her femicide and to exonerate the perpetrator, because that's what patriarchal narratives do. So 20, 30 years of powerful, dynamic, incredibly impactful feminist mobilizations and women's mobilizations at large played a major role in generating the kind of language, the kind of concepts that I needed to tell this story in a very different way, subverting that hegemonic, powerful narrative. So in order for me to be able to say to you, I just said it very slightly, this is a book that I wrote with my sister, right? But to be able to say that, it is in many ways possible, because now we talk about co-authorship, we talk about texts that belong to entire communities, we talk about a sense of language that is way more encompassing. And all that came as a result of radical feminist positions. And so every time that I say that it took me 30 years to write this book because of my own personal cycles of mourning, granted, but also because it took us as a society more or less that time to generate the kind of language able to subvert the powerful official narratives, and also it took us all that time to generate the kind of audience, the listening space, people willing to believe what they, the women, said, right? So, yes. So in many ways, I think it's kind of reciprocal. Now that the book is out there, and the young people, young women, and young men too, have been responding in such a touching, enriching, generous way. They've been invoking Liliana pretty much everywhere, just as we saw in those pictures, her name on, in graffitis on Mexico City's walls. Artists developing pieces, performances, installations around Liliana's own life. Theater plays. We're going to have the opening of a theater play very soon, in a couple of months, in Madrid on November the 25th, and so on and so on. So I believe that, and this I didn't know. Now, fortunately, books always end up doing whatever they are meant to, and they are their own animals and they have their own rules. I didn't know about how generous, Liliana was going to be received. I didn't know about this embrace. And I suppose what Liliana has been doing is phrasing experiences that remain silenced even now. And I get numerous notes, and I get into conversations with people, specifically with women, just telling me, I knew that something was wrong. I knew that something was off with what I was living, with my relationship or with my boyfriend, but I was not able to pinpoint exactly what it was. And Liliana helped me to clarify that, and I'm in a different place now. So I think Liliana would have been extremely happy just to be able to help, and to be able to embrace too these kids now, women their age now in the early 21st century. Yeah.
One can feel that writing for you is a form of active engagement in a community, and when curating your program for our festival, you've opted to invite authors who are also very active, and you've called your writing post-autonomous. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how this idea of writing has shaped your program and what that means.
No, absolutely wonderful. Good. Many of you have seen the pictures of writers, official pictures of writers. They are usually, there is a background of books. They are usually by themselves in front of a desk right now, just as we are right now. And they're looking like very serious, very solemn, into eternity. That's what they're communicating with, right? And there was, in fact, this very powerful stereotype. This is how I came to know writers. I thought that these writers were people unreachable in many ways, people who were born that way, you know, that they were born with the gift. And I didn't know if I was going to be, I didn't know if I had the gift to begin with. How do you find that out? How do you enroll in that program? I mean, I didn't know. And so in order for me to become a writer, I had to truly question that stereotype. I was not a man. I didn't have a large library behind my back. I didn't come from a family of means. My parents were professionals, but not necessarily avid readers. And I was a woman, and I wasn't born in Mexico City, you know, at the center of the country. So I definitely needed a different definition of a writer if I wanted to become one. And so in order for me to open up that door for myself first, and then for others too, I thought this is not just an idea that occurred to me. I mean, there is this whole discussion about language as a common good, language as belonging not just to writers, but in fact, writers borrowing language that belongs rightfully to speakers in entire communities, language that comes to us already with history and friction, and therefore a language that links us organically to the different communities and settings that we're working in. And in addition to that, I've been working with this idea that writing is not something that we conduct in isolation. He dicho en español, escribir no es soledad, ¿no? If I'm dealing with language, if I'm having dealings with language, I'm already working with many, with entire histories. And histories that very often are convoluted and tragic and that embrace contradiction too and dissent as well. And so this is the idea for me. And these are the kinds of books that I'm trying to forge, to write. You know? Books that are not giving their back to the societies in which they are born, books that are very aware of the material surroundings and the material processes that we have to go through in order to have time and space, right? And books also to learn how to write. So it is a quite a material way of looking at the whole process. And I think over the 20th century, that stereotypical, powerful idea of writing as a practice that is done in an ivory tower has been meaningfully revised. And the connection with writing and activism which was frowned upon throughout most of the 20th century, I think is way more welcome now. The idea that writing is not a discipline on its own, that is not an autonomous field on its own, but rather a field that is transverse and connected with other fields of knowledge and experience is very dear to my heart. And that's the reason why, by the way, my books take the shapes that they do. It's not just because I wanted to put, you know, these similar things together, but it's just trying to get at that critical point of the juxtaposition and the critical aspect that comes with that in terms of thinking and reading. So it is not surprising that I've been paying a lot of attention to writers who in my view are doing this in very different ways, you know, in their own ways, in different areas of the world. Migrant writers coming from Latin America, moving to, you know, coming from the global south, going to the north, doing the other way around, learning and writing in different languages, and or thinking, at least, if not writing in different language, at least using the other languages in order to better work with the language that they end up writing in. And writers who see their work as deeply connected to their communities, wherever they happen to be. So that to me is a defining characteristic of what we are doing as a community right now. And I'm very happy and very proud of the stunning, really talented, really bright writers that are part of our festival now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you've still got a chance to experience some of these excellent writers over the next couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have that much time left because we still we want to use the last 15 minutes of these events to give you the chance to ask some questions. And Christina, I therefore would suggest that you do the third reading part.
yeah,
And maybe
yeah.
if you want to, you could briefly introduce it where we are.
All right, perfect. Okay. Okay. I'm still in the first chapter of the book. Is Johanna here? Yes, Johanna. I didn't want to forget. My translator, the translator of this book into German is here. So without Johanna, I wouldn't be here. So thank you. Thank you so much. All right, October 4th. We are in the afterward, which is long. A day after visiting the Mexico City Attorney General's office to try to get copies of preliminary investigation 40-913-07, I go to the cemetery with my parents. It is October 4th. By now, Liliana has spent many more years underground, her bones cloaked by the fertile soil of the volcano, than on the surface of the earth. It would have been her 51st birthday. It is her 51st birthday. Libra, with an ascendant in Capricorn, a rooster in the Chinese zodiac. Here are the three of us, still invited to the feast of her life and her memory. We bring a hoe with us to weed out her grave and a couple of buckets to carry water. The tombstone is small and rectangular in shape, her name and the dates of her birth and death engraved in golden letters. No epigraph, no dedications, no decorations. We have not forgotten to bring flowers, buying them as we have for 29 years from the same vendor. Out there, beyond the boundaries of the cemetery, we might pass for normal people. On the other side of the rusted iron gate, we walk and eat, greet friends, celebrate triumphs, offer condolences, attend classes or parties. Lives unfolded out there, apparently unscathed. Careers, books, trips, birthdays, children. But in here, softly brushed by this wind that first rips the peaks of the volcano and later touches meditatively the interior of our lungs with its cold wings, here we are poor sorrow. It is a lie that time passes. Time is stuck. There is an inert body here, stuck between the hinges and bolts of time, suspending its rhythm and sequence. We have not grown. We will never grow. Our wrinkles are artificial, contrived indications of the lives that we could have lived, but that have gone astray. The cavities, the fragile bones, the gray hair, the numb joints, mere impersonations that hide the repetition, the redundancy, the refrain. We are locked in a bubble of guilt and shame, asking ourselves over and over again, what did we not see? This is the echo, Sunlight is always spectacular in the fall. Why couldn't we protect her? The whisper of the wind through the oyamels, the clarity of the pines. My father does not relinquish the hoe, and even though he's 84 years old, he removes the weeds all by himself, bending down to pluck the most stubborn grass or to undo the clods with its own rough hands when nothing else succeeds. He is soon out of breath. He sweats copiously. And while he toils over her grave, shedding some discreet tears in silence, I wonder how many times a day he remembers Liliana, how many times he recalls the amount of money that officers from the Attorney General's office demanded from him some 30 years ago to continue the investigation of Liliana's femicide. The required bribe. How many times a day does he blame himself for not having enough funds back then? How often the profane words, the crude words, the open-jawed beasts of words with which the police commanders and agents referred to Liliana's body, to Liliana's life, to Liliana's death, resonate in his ears. How many times a day does he murmur the word justice? You are never more defenseless than when you are rendered speechless. Who, in that summer of 1990, could have said, with their head held high, with the strength conferred by the conviction of being right and truthful, it was not her fault, nor did it matter where she was or how she dressed? Who, in a world where the word femicide did not exist, the term intimate terrorism did not exist, could have said what I now say without the slightest doubt? The only difference between my sister and me is that I never came across a murderer. The only difference between you and her. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. In this passage, the book turns to mourning and time. Writing such a personal story, I imagine that there must have been the urge to change the story. I even felt it while reading it, like thinking perhaps she's not going to die in the end.
Yes.
And perhaps this is more so than in writing fiction, I guess. How did you tackle this?
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right about that sensation. When I was writing the book, I would wake up at times in the middle of the night thinking that I had to hurry up because this time I was going to be able to save her. And it took me a couple of minutes just to, to be fully awake and realize that Liliana was not there. And so that's the power of literature, I think. And the power, the might of words, that you are not only invoking someone who is not there, you are in fact preparing the terrain, creating a space so that our loved ones could in fact stand up and speak and tell their truth. So I do believe that literature, in all its might, can do that. And if I didn't believe that, I think it would have been really, really difficult. It would have been impossible, in fact, to write this book. So every time that people, readers come back to me and they talk about Liliana as though Liliana is a friend of them now, every time that they refer to Liliana's own life or they quote her words, I'm reminded of the power of literature to not only give a testimony of the world in which we live, but also to prepare ourselves for different experiences and for alternative worlds too. Yeah.
I would like to open up now to you, the audience. So if you have questions, please raise your hand. We have microphones available, and we would like to ask you to step outside and come to the mics if you have a question. You could also ask the question in Spanish if you want to, if there's anyone.
There is one over there.
Yeah, so if you could please come outside, and the persons with the mics will come to you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Let
please.
me-
You start.
Yes.
Hi, Christina.
Hello.
Thank you for your powerful presence. I think it resonates with all women here. I'm curious about the book being written by yourself in Spanish and English, and I was wondering if that was like a personal decision, if you wanted to translate the book yourself, or if you rewrote the book in a whole new process. And I wonder how that was for you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for your question. And what's your name?
Paula.
Paula? Okay. Nice meeting you, Paula. Yeah, this is very interesting. I've lived in the United States for so many years. Oof, too many. And I've been a writer. I became the writer I am, writing in Spanish, living and working in the United States, living and working in English too. Throughout all those years, I wrote my academic work originally in English. And I wrote some creative work in Spanish, but I never felt the need to publish that. It's just my own personal, intimate exercises. And I thought that was going to be the case for this book. When I began Liliana's Invincible Summer, I just did as I usually do. I wake up very early in the morning and I start writing. No brushing teeth, not combing hair, nothing. Just directly from just a very quick transition between dreaming and writing. And that's been important for my own process. Then I realized, one of those mornings, I realized that that some of those fragments that I was writing came naturally in English, as though English would allow me to get to spaces and feelings that Spanish couldn't, which goes against whatever we've been trained to think about the relationship between native languages and second languages. And so I became very curious about that. I didn't know why was that happening. But at one point during the process, I said, well, that's okay. If this is going to be it, let's work with that. And I continued doing that. So some mornings I would write in Spanish. Some other mornings I would start revising the work that I had written before in Spanish, but thinking mostly in English. Some mornings I would start writing in English directly, and then revising those fragments with Spanish in mind. It was very cumbersome. It was very slow too. And then it dawned on me later that we haven't talked enough, or at least I hadn't heard enough about the relationship of bilingualism and grief. And I had to admit that I was writing in English passages that were just so painful for me to write in Spanish. And then I came to learn that this language with which I have a very complicated relationship, English, and it's not just from a personal point of view. It's a relationship between Mexico and the United States. It's an imperial language vis-a-vis some other native languages. There is a lot there to be unpacked. But I realized that this other language that I've been living in and loving too was becoming a sort of refuge for me, a place in which, or through which, I was able to utter words otherwise too painful to even bear in mind. I've been thinking about this idea. I'm writing an essay about that because I'm sharing this experience now as though this became immediately clear to me. That was not the case. It's something that I've been having to work through. Because it was not a decision I made away from the book or a principal decision, a decision that I just committed to because I wanted to. It was very organic in that way, and it surprised me. And I guess this was a book that needed that process. So it was not the case, just to be clear, of a book that I finished in Spanish and that I translated into English. It was way more complicated than that, and less strict and dirtier, if you want to use that term. So some mornings I would write in one language and then on the other, and you can only imagine my files and my. It was confusing too, but when I did notice that it came organically to me, I decided to work with that material and to honor that need too. And whenever I finish that essay that I'm working on, I'll try to publish that I'll get Johanna to translate that perhaps into German, and then we'll get to the end of that thought. But I don't know, there are ways in which this second language often we take to be limiting, right? It is often said that we don't have the same sense of humor, or the second language doesn't allow us or doesn't let us fully into more intimate conversations. Surprisingly, it gives you, or at least it gave me, that kind of protection and that kind of freedom too. So I'll continue thinking about that, and thank you for asking that question. All right.
Hi, my name is Lynette, and I want to say that the first question was a version of the question I was going to ask, but we're so fortunate because we can get your book in 3 languages.
Yes.
So I went to get it, and I instinctively got it in English, so I live a bilingual existence.
Mm-hmm.
Y mi amiga me regañó, me dijo, ¿por qué no lo compras en español?
Mm-hmm.
Y le dije, porque me va a tomar mucho tiempo leer el cuento. Y pienso que me voy a perder mucho en ese cuento. Y dijo, pero si lo escribió en español es que a lo mejor tiene más impacto en español. And listening to you today, I think about if I read it in Spanish, I might have an experience as a Latina reading it and living in 2 cultures and understanding how Liliana had to move in the world, certainly. So maybe if you could just talk about the identity politics of a Spanish reader reading the book in Spanish versus reading it in a different language, especially for the women, the female readers.
Yeah. No, that's a wonderful question too. Thank you for asking it. Let me see. When I was about to publish the book, I was still trying to open up the case, and I wanted to rush the publication in Spanish. That's the reason why we did that in May of 2021. The English version, which was already completed, underwent some other transformations. So I realized later that I had confused a couple of dates, for example. There were scenes that came powerfully to me that I had a chance to include it in the English version that are not included in the Spanish version. So even though they are the same book, they are slightly different books. I think the impact has been different in each language, but I think it's less related to identity and more to the context in which that conversation takes place. In Spanish, and specifically throughout Latin America, with such a vivid and powerful feminist mobilizations from the last 20, 30 years, there is an urgency. In fact, there is a conversation already developed and an urgency about issues surrounding femicide. The same is not true for English-speaking communities. So the use of the word femicide is not as common, if at all. I once tried to write an article about el feminicida, and I wanted my translator at that point, Max, I forget his last name, he translated the word feminicida in English as femicider, and the newspaper that ended up publishing this article changed the word femicider to killer, claiming that no one would understand what femicider was, which in English, it might be true. So there is a conversation that I truly hope gets activated by reading this book. We need to have that conversation because obviously femicide occurs also with great frequency in English-speaking countries. In the United States, 3 women are killed by their intimate partners on a daily basis as well. Experts have been talking about an epidemic of femicide, of forcibly silenced femicides in the United States. So it is not that we don't have that reality. It's the forces surrounding this, the mobilizations that have been producing that language throughout Latin America are not the same ones right now in the United States, as we all well know. So I guess that's a major difference. That these terms, as I said earlier, they come from the streets, they come from the struggle, right? And feminist struggles have been preponderant and terribly important in contemporary Mexican and Latin American history. And so I hope that we can share that with our accomplices, with our comrades in the United States and other English-speaking countries. Thank you.
Christina, we're already in overtime. So you are going to sign books
I
outside
will, yes.
in the foyer in front of the photo wall. So perhaps you will be around a bit more and open to short questions during the book signings.
Claro que sí. Nos vemos en la firma de libros allá a la entrada. Yeah, I'll see
A
you
big
guys
applause
over
for
there.
Christina.
Thank
Rivera.
you. Thank you.